Okay, question.
So previously we talked about mortality rates and crude and shimmy and RAMI and everything like that. How do we actually use them?
I think they're quite sensitive measures, these, so you've got to use them quite carefully. And people talk about a sort of pyramid of investigation, because what you don't want is lots of people setting lots of hairs running when data is not as good as it might be. So this pyramid of investigation, if you imagine a pyramid or a triangle, often the data is not as good as we would like it to be. So people were discharged and readmitted onto wards instead of being transferred. There's multiple episodes within the spells. The clinical coding might not have picked up a whole range of comorbidities because they weren't available in the notes, and they were rushing, so they coded from an EDN, electronic discharge notice. So you have to start and make sure the data is absolutely right. So if you imagine you'd sort of knock over sort of recording issues, then clinical coding issues, then you're getting into how is the hospital set up? Is it organised in such a way that it could be done better? And then right at the top of this pyramid, you are very rarely getting to a point where you'd say, we're now a bit worried about this doctor or this team or this group of clinicians, and they don't seem to be getting the same outcomes as everyone else. Perhaps they're doing it using a slightly different methodology or a slightly different surgical technique, but we are now worried about them. That is very rare, but that happens. And at that point you would say, we need you to stop doing that because we're going to help you retrain and do it in a slightly different way. But that's very rare. It's usually an issue with the data.
So how would you know it was important enough to look into in the first place?
Yeah, so to try and simplify it, if you think back to the sort of crude mortality that we were talking about, that is your actual number of deaths. How many people came into hospital? 100. How many of them died? 10. Your crude mortality rate is 10%. From this model, you would come up with an expected measure. So of those 100 people that came in, you can score them all, just like scoring an insurance risk, on how many we expected to die. So if 10 died, crude, and we predicted 20 to die, we did much better than we would have hoped. If only 5 died, and so on, do you see what I mean? So you're comparing an actual and expected rate. The slight issue with those is that they don't statistically provide an alert for you. So what people then do is they use measures like a QSUM, a cumulative sum score, which is a sort of logarithmic relationship between the expected and the actual. And the beauty of it is that it creates an alert. If you imagine a kind of a smoke alarm going along, and then it triggers and it pings. That's what techniques like that do. But there's a whole range of techniques which would not be accessible to the public. Things like funnel charts. Are you within inside the funnel plot? Are you within 95% or 98%? This is how close to the expected we think you are. And at any one point, you may get a couple of hospitals or a couple of specialties which fall outside of those funnel plots or outside of those control limits. And that is your trigger to then investigate them, starting with an assumption that the data is probably not as good as it could be, but working up that triangle into, we're now a bit worried about this actually.
So what governance is there around the analysis of mortality?
So you'll find in most trusts that they report mortality, crude and adjusted, some measure, maybe 1, maybe 2 or 3, in some sort of board report, which is a public document. But then the thing that's happened recently is this encouragement to create mortality surveillance groups. So that's a sort of a formal group chaired by a medical director usually, which would have someone like me as a director of information there, but it would have a range of clinicians, someone from audit potentially, someone from clinical coding, and they would meet monthly in a quite a formal way, agenda, minutes, actions, and so on.